Welcome to the JMark Business Innovation Technology Experience.
Okay, welcome everybody that's joining us on Facebook, and to those of us joining us on the podcast, welcome. Today we have another fascinating topic that we are going to discuss, and that is what we are calling the pandemic paradox. What we've seen a lot is, a lot of companies are wanting and seeing that they need to adapt and know that technology is a way that they can adapt and innovate, but at the same time they want it at lower costs. And the pandemic has seen massive changes. We've talked about how there's been a huge increase in digital transformation. We have companies like Facebook that have said that 50% of their workforce will be remote for 5 to 10 years. That they'll be able to work remote for 5 to 10 years. Twitter has announced that their employees can work remote forever, as long as the company is around, or unless they change policy. And so that's changes in the fundamental ways of how we use IT, and companies are changing how they operate. They're doubting the purpose of travel, doubting that so many trips are needed. They're doubting that events are needed as much. And at the same time, you have people that are, kind of zoomed out and sick of all of the virtual meetings. And so it's a conflict on both sides. But the truth of the matter is that in order to innovate and adapt in this changing world, we have to be better. We have to use technology and all the resources and tools at our disposal to innovate and create a future that serves our customers and helps our employees and company be successful. And so, Jeremy, you've you interact with a lot of prospects and a lot of clients, and have for many years. What are some of the things that you're kind of seeing in the marketplace right now when you're talking to prospects in terms of money? And is money really the big dilemma, or is it something else?
Sorry, always good to start with a big cough, especially during the pandemic. It sets the tone, right? One of the things I think that I've seen more in the last few months when talking to clients and prospects alike is I think everybody's just looking for more bang for their dollar. You can equate that to the recession or to the pandemic or to the social situation, the election year. It all repeats. It's a lot like it was in 2008, 2012, just kind of amplified. Everybody wants to see more bang for their dollar. They want to see that they're getting more value for what they spend. And I think it's interesting that it doesn't matter what it's in, whether it's in IT or whether it's in their marketing spend or whatever it is. They are as almost a whole across anybody we've talked to. It's how can we get more for less? And being kind of the old guy here who's at JMark, who's kind of seen the iterations over the years, I've always pointed to 2008 as kind of a transformative year. The recession in 2008 was when JMark actually had some of its biggest growth because people were looking to squeeze more value out of their IT dollar. And we stepped in and provided that in a lot of companies where we would either augment or replace a poorly performing IT situation. It's almost like that's happening again, just in a bigger way because of the pandemic. And the fact that more people are working from home is in some ways actually affecting the IT situation in a positive way, because people are realizing that the only way they could do this is with IT. I was talking to my father-in-law the other day. who's retired, but he made a comment that it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. That yeah, I'm able to work from home, or I've been able to do this, and most people have been able to work from home. Can you imagine what would have happened if this pandemic would have happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago, before the internet infrastructure was what it is today? Not perfect. It's a heck of a lot better than it was. And before technologies like Zoom and WebEx were out there, and VoIP was pretty much everywhere, where everybody pretty much had their life on a mobile phone where they could just step in and do business from home like it's no big deal. So the fact that people view that as kind of a norm has kind of worked kind of to an advantage for an IT person, or for an IT company, for an IT strategist, because it's not as big of a pivot as it could have been, or it would have been, to try to move infrastructure into a cloud environment where it's more accessible, to try to put companies in a position where they can say, yeah, my workforce is going to be remote for a year, for 2 years, whatever. If you remember back in March, we started out saying, yeah, we're going to work from home for 2 weeks and see what happens. That's what everybody said. It was spring break's going to be an extra week long. Remember that? I mean, that's kind of a laughable thought now, but that's what we all thought.
Nobody remembers that. That was like, might as well have been the ISO.
Yeah. So anyway, I ramble, but I think it all comes down to people wanting more bang for their buck and more value for the dollar. I think IT budgets and budgets in general got squeezed by about 25%, looking for more effectiveness in 2008. I see it happening again now, in a compounding method.
The thing that one thing you said that kind of strikes me though is, because I've experienced this all through my life, you get what you pay for. I was relating this story to others, but I can't stop thinking about this. The other day, I took the kids to a restaurant, and we hadn't been to this restaurant for 9 months, or however long COVID's been going around. And honestly, we've had tons of problems at this restaurant in the past, and it would be a restaurant that everybody would recognize. But I figured, with COVID, they'd surely up their game. And so we went there. Kids love to go there, and they messed up my order. They messed up the hamburger. I'm dairy free, and they threw cheese on it. And I never forget to say, I can't have cheese. And they brought my son the wrong thing, and it was just a fiasco. And it made me think at the time, and I talked to the manager too. It's like, if you're gonna survive, they're gonna survive. They have to adapt. And when I apply that technology to technology, I'm thinking, okay, so this company has these little kiosk things sitting on the table. I'm sure you've all seen them, where kids can play games. You can pay your bill on there, and you can actually order from there. So why don't they arm these servers with the same stinking application? Give them an iPad or some tablet. Let them note what it is, turn it to you, and face it. I mean, it's a very, very small thing where you're investing in IT to create an experience that will help to level up your organization and help it to survive and thrive in a post-COVID world. But they are doing exactly what you're saying. They're trying to get more bang for the buck. The server was writing on a piece of paper in chicken scratch, handed that to a cook who probably didn't speak English as a first language, and things got mixed up somehow in there. It's just the bang for the buck is all great when there's a really good strategy to make sure you're actually getting more. But when you're just trying to reduce funds for the sake of reducing funds, you're going to give up something.
Maybe, but I'm gonna keep going with the food thing, because I've literally gone weeks at a time without leaving my house during this process, and I've kind of grown to like it. But from an eating out perspective, I haven't eaten out hardly at all, and used to be a pretty big part of my life.
Months. So I know what you mean.
Yeah, but I will admit one of my guilty pleasures is Sonic. No product placement here, sorry, but I recently discovered, for being a Sonic fan, I recently discovered their mobile app. So it got me to thinking, the Sonic mobile app, it helps them out because it reduces the amount of time that you sit there taking up one of their stalls. They get their orders in. It takes out a human interaction that you just said. It probably saves them some human capital. But I would say, even though I love Sonic, I will recognize that when I would go and order and push the button and give my order, it would be wrong 60% of the time, because I always have a weird order. I always get a number 2 hamburger, no cheese, with mustard, no onions, and onion rings. And the no onions on the burger plus onion rings as the side, mind blowing. But on the app, it's never been wrong because it's written down and it doesn't have to rely on that person to translate it. So that's kind of the converse to what you're talking about is, but then, do you want to be the guy that advocates, Sonic reducing the head count by 1 because they don't need that person to sit there at the microphone and take orders?
Well, I mean, even in that experience, they didn't have paper menus. They gave you a little card on the table that had a QR code, and you scan it with your hand, and it takes you to a PDF document that you're sitting there like kind of enlarging and moving around. And I mean, in the same experience, they could have just sent you to the app, because they have an app and or created something to help you have a better experience.
Yeah, I think there has to be a desire, like you guys are talking about, to use the technology well, to put in the work. And that's where your IT provider, your IT partner can come in and help you. A larger, big organization might be able to do this with their own IT company, but even if you have an MSP, they can come in and help you, be a partner to help you figure out how to take the IT, take the technology that's available to you, and start leveraging these opportunities that technology can bring you. But you have to have the desire to do that. You got to want to put in, I always hate to say the phrase, you got to put in the work, because too many people hear that and they're like, what? Putting in the work sounds like a lot of work. And so they kind of start zoning out. But the thing is again, with the right IT partner, it might not be as much work as you anticipate. And that's the conversation that you need to have to find out how you can start leveraging technology. Because, one thing that occurred to me, Jeremy, when you were talking, is this idea you were talking about, how, what would we have done 20 years ago without Zoom and all of the technologies that we're using so much now. And, I always think that a lot of these technologies have sort of been lingering around for at least a few years in some cases, but it often takes a crisis or something to sort of push things into overdrive where people adapt quickly. But that's the key right there, is the companies that on the other side of this that are going to be the furthest ahead are the ones that really do adapt. And I say that as coming from somebody who in my personal life is not an early adopter. I'm always slow, and I always want to be taking my time and thinking and mulling things over. But that's not the way to get ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, in thinking about that restaurant experience, and I don't, want to point the finger and say, they just don't know what they're doing. But in truth, they don't. But that's not an insult. It's ignorance. You're in your world. A restaurateur is a restaurateur. An engineer is an engineer. And oftentimes we don't look outside our bubble to solve a problem, for years and years and years, and I don't know how many people have been writing orders on paper, and that's just what they do. And so I would think as a restaurateur, you'd be like, well, that's the cheapest thing we can do. But going back to this cost discussion, one thing that I think we need to address is that the true problem is not always cost. There's a perception of cost. If we solve a problem, that problem is potentially costing us money, whether that's hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. And so when we're in those bubbles and we have these stories that we're telling ourselves, we often don't realize that technology, while there's an investment that has to go in, it could prevent that loss of revenue, loss of that big expensive problem that you're having on the other side. And so then it's not a discussion of costs, it's a discussion of reducing risks, it's a discussion of increasing revenue, it's a discussion of just being more successful.
Yeah, and just devil's advocate though, that's real easy to say whenever you're well prepared and you've got a little bit of money in the bank versus you're scared. Investing isn't a word that comes up when people are scared. And I think a lot of people are really scared right now. Like again, whether it's because regardless of what it's because of, pandemic, recession, election, and it's harder to hear the word invest. It's harder to hear the word think about the future whenever you've got whenever fear is driving you. So a lot of that comes into a person's mental state and their ability to get beyond the fear, and it's hard to do.
It is. The one thing I wrote down a few minutes ago when you were saying something, Jeremy, is the idea, and I think this is how you get past that fear, is to try to flip the script in your mind so that you're not thinking about what you're spending, but you first take the first step and get smarter, which is what Todd is talking about, having conversations with people who understand it. We're talking about technology here. So getting a hold of an MSP that can help you and make you smarter, so ultimately you're spending smarter. You're putting the money where it's going to bring you the best value, because maybe it's not a matter of just spending less or spending more or something as black and white as that. Maybe it's a matter of moving your technology investments and taking a look to see where you can spend better that you're not doing at the moment.
I would think that these would be conversations that your technology partner would be having with you as well. Like, yes, you do have to put in the work, but I think that if you have a good partnership there, they're going to be initiating this because they are the expert in that area.
Yeah, going back to one of the things that that Jeremy said, we're always investing. Every executive on the planet is always investing in something. There's budget discussions. And especially more so now as we're getting closer to the end of the year, especially during a pandemic, because we've seen loss of revenues. There's always a decision of where to invest something. And we were talking earlier about sales and marketing. We all know that, and it's been touted for generations that you invest in. You don't not invest in sales and marketing during a crisis. You have to power through it. You have to communicate. You have to adapt and be ready for when that crisis ends, or you get to the other side of the crisis and you're not going to have any sales or leads in your funnel to be able to bounce back. And not to dispute what you said, because it is true that there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of uncertainty in the world among people, but it's also, getting out of our skin, and going back to what Dax and Christina said, working with people that understand things that you don't. And sometimes that's just your employees. widening the scope of what are the problems. And oftentimes there are problems that employees are having that executives don't even know about because they're so far down the line, and the employees are just powering through, and banging their head against this problem, and just dealing with it. And executives don't realize that there's a problem to be solved. And so, I think it's all true though. I mean, there is fear, but at the same time, while true, we should invest in sales and marketing, we also have to invest at this point in change, whatever that change is, because unlike many crises that we've had over the years, this crisis is different because behavior is actually changing. Like you said, Jeremy, you like working from home. You don't like going to restaurants that much now. Your behavior has changed. And so how are people going to adapt to that change? If they only invest in sales and marketing to sell a product that was attractive before the pandemic, or a service that was attractive before the pandemic, that's not going to help them during or after. And oftentimes, and this isn't always the case, but there's a big portion of the time when technology will feed the innovation and feed the adoption and the change and the innovation to whatever this new platform is. And part of that is not because technology is some holy grail. It's because the world is changing. Everybody is digital. They're looking at their phones. They're downloading these apps. They're ordering things online. And traditional businesses and a lot of businesses have to adapt and figure out how they're going to meet customers where they are.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one word, Todd, that I think I might have mentioned this last week or the other week in different podcasts, but this idea that we talk about innovation, and I think we always have to remind people that innovation doesn't mean this like grand leap forward. Innovation means what it means for your business, the change you make. Maybe the innovation is moving from a notepad that you're taking orders on to some kind of app on an iPad or something. And it might be small, but it can still make a difference for you. And then also, when you were, Jeremy and Todd, you were both talking about fear, and the thought popped into my head that again, going back to this idea of what Christina was saying, fear is destroyed by knowledge. So if you do have this fear, the first thing to do is go out and learn everything you can with the help of your MSP, with the help of your IT provider, about what you can do. And that can help alleviate that fear of the unknown, because suddenly it's known.
And I think that's great. And the other thing that I would add to that would be don't try to build Rome in a day. Something that Tom Douglas has been preaching at JMark for years, and it's proven itself to be kind of prophetic, I think, in this day and age. It's the idea that if everyone will strive to be more efficient and provide 25% more value than they are expected to, than they're paid for, whether that's an employee, whether that's a service provider, whatever it is, provide 25% more value, not double, just a little bit more. And then 4 people can do the work of 5. $4 have the spending power of $5. And if you can just think of it in small steps, all those little things added up across a company, across a department, across an environment, make a big deal. And if you're a football player and you try to go out and throw a 70-yard, touchdown pass on every play, you're probably not going to last long. But if you make just 4 yards on every play, every third down, you're going to get a first down and you're going to win football games. So Yeah, and those aren't the ones that make the news. They're not the ones that get on the highlight reel as much, but they win Super Bowl rings. So I think that all applies is, think small and coordinate those efforts.
I was thinking that, as you were talking, Jeremy, I was thinking about still this idea of the title of what we chose for this discussion, more IT at lower costs. And the thought, kind of popped into my head, is it possible to have more IT or better IT at lower costs? And I wanted to explore that, whether there are pitfalls or advantages, because I think that there are a million variables. You deal with these probably more than anybody, Jeremy, with talking to prospects in different industries and employee count and the maturity and whether they have an internal IT person or outsourced and whether they're in the cloud or not in the cloud. And there's a million variables. But, as we're talking about how customers are kind of enthralled in the digital experience, what is the change in IT that's needed to keep that experience? So we have people working from home. Is that potentially more expensive or less expensive? We have office space that's not being used. Is that an avenue where we could shift? There are tons of applications online where if you're potentially changing software, if you're using an on-premise software that to do project management or collaboration, there's potentially lots of avenues where it may or may not be beneficial to switch to a SaaS application. Anyways, I'm just throwing random things out, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jeremy, on can you really get more bang for your buck?
I think you always can. And like I said, I think it just goes back to what I said a minute ago is don't try to do it all at once. Do it in little increments. And don't just focus on cutting, focus on adding in the right places and shifting rather than cutting. So many people make the, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember there was a term that was used, and I don't remember the exact wording. It was at the beginning of the COVID stuff that when we at JMark at the executive level were looking at our budgets and how it was going to affect things, somebody said, and I'll get the quote wrong, but you can't cut your way to savings. You can't cut your way to making your budget. You can't cut your way out of the hole. You shift, you adjust. And, to me, that's what it all comes down to. And, when I go in and meet with somebody, if I'm having an appointment with somebody who's invited JMark in to talk to them about their IT needs, generally they have some pain. There's something going on. They don't just invite, somebody to come in and talk about their IT because they're bored. Most people have too much to do. But, usually I can tell within the first 5 minutes if this is somebody who's trying to cut their way to savings, or if this is somebody who's trying to, increase efficiency and expand their way into a better normal and a better world. And it's interesting how much that's changed in the last year, because it always used to be more about how do I keep the status quo just by doing something different, and now how do I turn the status quo upside down because my hair's on fire.
What I've found is kind of interesting through this particular crisis, the pandemic, is that the problems just changed. It's like there were challenges before the pandemic, but they kind of just, like you said, you have to shift solutions, but the reason why you have to shift solutions because the problem shifted. You previously had a problem with such and such, now you have a problem with this. Whether that's video conferencing or how to manage a project with people being remote. And it's just another problem to solve, so to speak. But in that sense of shifting, the same is true for budgets. The same is true for the solutions. But I think going back to kind of what Dax was saying, and everybody, I guess, there's just so many different avenues. We have to get out of our shell and get out of our bubble and look at what is the best solution to solve the particular problem. And most of the time, the problem that we're trying to solve, at least in my experience, is often something we don't have experience with, especially during during COVID. I mean, there's always been problems in the world, but it's like all of a sudden there's new challenges that I have to figure out a solution for, whether that's through a software or through a tactic or whatnot. And I have to reach out to those that understand and that have experience.
Well, and recognizing that sometimes the answer isn't change, it's adapt, because this pandemic isn't over. And this year, 2020, and the dumpster fire that it's been isn't over yet. We still got a whole quarter left. Arguably the roughest one. What's that?
We still have the asteroid to come.
We still have an asteroid. We still have the election. I mean, we've got, what do we have? Double hurricanes? I mean, how about some triple blizzards? And what are they called? I'm waiting for the polar vortex and a hurricane to come at the same time. I think that's going to be epic. I've got that on my bingo card for November. But I think people need to get out of the mindset of change to change. You change because the world changed, so I'm going to change. It's adapt. It's roll with the punches. In boxing, it's a dance. You change your stance based on what your opponent is doing and how they're moving. I've never boxed in my life, so I don't know why I'm using a boxing analogy, but I do know that you don't go in with just a straight up plan of how to attack, because, as they say, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. This battle's still going on between the pandemic and everything else. So just be agile and keep shifting.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy, like you said, we talked about this the other week, but I think people are sort of like settled in, and they don't want to. They're worried about having these conversations. And you talked about people that only call us when they are in trouble, when there's some pain. But maybe even if you don't have pain, I think people get afraid to call us. And we talked about this the other week, because there's this fear that we're going to come in, not just JMark, but any MSP is going to come in and be like, hey, let's just have you spend a lot of money. That's what we're here for, is we're here to sell you a bunch of technology so you spend more money. And that they should not look at it that way. But again, it's an opportunity to call in somebody who can help you do exactly what you were talking about, Todd, and understand something that's out of the realm of your knowledge, and find those ways that you're looking for that you're not going to be able to find for yourself. And don't be afraid to call in, an IT company and have that conversation to learn and see where you can make those adaptations.
I feel like some people too are probably scared that they're going to come in and not just try to sell you something, but they're going to come in and find some things that they maybe kind of deep down know are there and they're not prepared to deal with yet. But putting it off is not going to do you any favors in the long run.
I tell you, Christina, speaking to that, just as we were beginning, I had this thought in my head that I should look up statistics about cybersecurity and cybercrime in COVID-19. So I did it. I ended up on the website ZDNet, which is an important, news source for all things technology and IT. And they have this this page that's a roundup of all COVID-19 cybersecurity challenges. And I started scrolling to look. I was like, oh, I'll find something real quick to find a statistic. And this page is like a never-ending scroll. There are so many articles about different cybersecurity challenges that have arisen because of COVID-19. That is definitely not a place where you want to be pulling back your spending right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that for this discussion. I mean, we've talked about that in other scenarios about how I think the number of cyber attacks has quadrupled, if I'm not mistaken, since like April, and it's insane, you know. But in the vein of the discussion about getting more bang for your buck, I know a lot of people don't really look at it from the other side and go, okay, we're in a pandemic, revenue's down. What could destroy us? What could really be bad? Because this isn't bad enough. We're masochists. We want to make it worse. You know, what could really be bad? And one of those things that could really be bad is, you know, having your data stolen and having to shut down your company.
Well, I mean, say one thing for criminals. I mean, they are opportunists, and this is a huge opportunity for cyber criminals to take advantage of the situation. You know, something Dax just said made me think of something that I struggle with. So I wear two hats right now at JMark. I mean, you guys know this, but for anybody that might be watching, you know, I'm going out and visiting with new clients, but I also am overseeing our telecommunications division. So helping people in there, my job is to help people with evaluating their internet circuits, their private lines, their telephone systems, their telephone circuits. Let's say 8 out of 10 times I talk to somebody that is willing to talk. I can actually save them money because there's a more efficient way to do things. And until you're in the industry, you don't know. And it's so easy to get taken for a ride by a carrier or by a provider, or maybe not even taken for a ride, just be left on an inefficient plan because, you know, things become more efficient as time goes on. Something I've noticed this year since the pandemic is what I've started referring to as salesman fatigue. Nobody, even though nobody wants to hear the fact that I can actually help free up some budget for you and probably get you more for what you're more product for less than what you're paying on that side, not managed services, but on telecommunications, doing an audit. Nobody wants to hear it. Everybody's got fatigue. They don't want to hear about anything new. You're trying to sell me something. I'm actually not, but click. Okay, cool. And I know you guys see this on the marketing side. I think people are so fatigued right now with being talked to, told what to do, given advice, offered a solution. I think people are shut down as it relates to being sold or marketed or talked to, that they just don't want to hear it. And you know, sometimes that's to the people's detriment because there's a great opportunity out there. If you don't open your eyes to it, you'll never hear it. And I'm guilty of it too. I counted up just a minute ago, in the last this week, I've gotten 18 solicitation emails from lead generation companies trying to sell me lead generation because of that very reason. Guess how many of them I've replied to? So I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, but you know, I think it's part of the pandemic. It's another pandemic. It's caused people just to shut down and have this level of fatigue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a good comment because and we've seen that on the marketing side too. But it's not. I wouldn't call it sales fatigue. I would just call it more fatigue in general. You know, there's the garbage that's all over social media. There's the bad news left and right. There's schools shutting down and schools going up and then shutting down and then going up and then shutting down, and parents are dealing with that stuff, and the all of that affects your business life. And I've seen that exact same thing too. I mean, when I'm dealing with the million things that I deal with, and I get those same emails, probably 2 or 3 times as many, and every single one of them is just delete, 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 or archive, or whatever, because partly because I don't want to take the energy to vet them out. I don't want to take the energy because that energy is essentially a cost, and so I think that, that's a good point on the telecommunications. We sent an email to roughly 80,000 people on our list, maybe, what was it, Dax, maybe 3 months ago, and regarding telecommunications, because we're not trying to sell anything. We could actually save money. And what you said, Jeremy, 8 out of 10 people, you can save money, because that is an area where people just ignore. It's like you just pay the bill, pay the bill, pay the bill, pay the bill, not realizing that behind the scenes there are changes in the industry, there are changes in technology, there are changes in bandwidth that all could affect your business, so you could be spending money elsewhere. And we got 0 response on that email. And part of it, I think, is just because this idea of, oh my gosh, changing internet providers, oh man, that would be a pain in the butt. Or changing my phone.
It ain't broke.
line.
I'm not gonna fix it.
Oh, exactly. It's the perception, or the fatigue, the perception of the fatigue to come.
I think about that as the idea of when your alarm goes off in the morning and you're laying in bed and you're just like, I'm too tired to get up. It's going to take so much energy to get up. It's going to be horrible. I can't think of anything worse than throwing off the covers and putting my feet on the ground. And then you do it and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But while you're in bed, it's like you can't imagine anything worse. And you have to just kind of power through. You got to put your feet on the ground sometimes, and that's when you find out, oh, that wasn't as bad as I was expecting it was going to be. I'm actually okay now that I'm out of bed.
Also, one thing that I changed on that, well, not really with the bed analogy, but but one thing, when I've been looking at solutions to problems that I'm dealing with, I've looked at them with a little bit different vein in the last year, and that is, I need a solution, but I don't want to be the solution. I don't want to be the integrator of the solution, the innovator of the solution, or whatever. So if I'm going to be given a solution to a problem I have right now, with whatever that is, I'm okay with spending a little bit more money so that somebody else can be the integrator of that problem, or that solution, and I can focus on all the things I need to do with. And I think that's one thing we forget about, because our industry has a little bit of a bad rap. There's so many people that have hired IT providers, have hired phone system experts, have dealt with ISPs, which is about one of the worst things in the world, and they've just had this horrible, maddening experience, and so they think that's just how it is. They don't realize that they could innovate, solutions could be solved with someone else actually doing that work, and that's where someone like JMark comes in.
And that can give you that energy back. Doing exactly what you're talking about, Todd, which is handing off the thing that is going to sap your energy to somebody else. Having taken the time to do that.
Okay, so I think we've had a pretty interesting discussion. Appreciate everybody joining us today, and appreciate you, Jeremy, for giving us your perspective, as always, entertaining and insightful. I think some of the takeaways that I've gotten, and feel free to throw out anything that I might not mention from this, is that we have to look at IT not from the standpoint of an expense, but as a standpoint of as an investment. We have to innovate in small steps, whether that's through technology or through other means, so that we can meet customers where they are and innovate in this pandemic and post-pandemic world to create a new normal. We have to continue to innovate and adapt to meet our customers where they are. Security is still a big issue, and we have to look at adapting to the risks that are coming to us. And so there's a lot of things to consider, and we'd invite everyone to take a look at our website, jmark.com. We have a lot of information on every avenue of security and innovation and adapting to the new normal there. We'd love to talk to you, and please join us next week, where we will be giving away a special prize. Stay tuned.
Hopefully it's Sonic onion rings. Because I
might get the order wrong.
I'm gonna have to get some onion rings.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you for attending this podcast. We hope it has been informative and helped convey that at JMark, we are people first and technology second. To learn more and discover additional content relevant to your business, please visit us online at jmark.com or at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You may also call us at 844-44-JMark. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again.